take it in turn to the 38th chapter of Ezekiel and to that 13th verse. We know the nations involved in the invasion itself. Persia, Iran, Put, Libya, Gomer, Turkey, etc. All of these nations are neighbors of the nation of Israel. There's a prophecy here of a battle coming in the future that has never occurred in the past. This prophecy has never been fulfilled. The reference to Tarshish is a reference to a nation that was known in ancient times as the name for Europe. So the only place we find Europe in the prophecy is that the European nations object to this invasion, but they're unwilling to do anything about it. They will not send troops to intervene on behalf of the nation of Israel. And certainly the people of Israel even today are concerned about their security and about their future. Will the United States or Europe or other nations come to their defense and to their aid if people like the leader of Iran fulfills his dream of exterminating Israel and driving them into the ocean? Now, the only way you can read America potentially into the prophecy is to suggest that Americans are transplanted Europeans, by and large, not in totality. Well, that would also apply to Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and other nations. There are no clear prophecies about the United States per se. First of all, the United States did not exist in biblical times. Sometimes you'll hear somebody say, well, there's a reference to an eagle somewhere in a prophecy. That's a symbol of the United States. But I would remind you, the eagle is also the symbol of Mexico. It's the symbol of Germany. The United States is not the only nation symbolized by the eagle. And furthermore, the biblical term eagle applies to a vulture. It's not America. The center of biblical prophecy is always the nation of Israel. If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, keep your eye on Israel. That essential land bridge between Europe and Asia and Africa is the key place where ultimately prophecy will be fulfilled. When we look at the book of Daniel, chapters 2 and 7, Daniel tells us there are 4 major empires coming in the future: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And then out of that 4th empire, the 4th beast, he calls him, there will come a future kingdom of the Antichrist in the future. The 4th beast that has 10 horns. The same symbolism you have in the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter, for the kingdom of the Antichrist. And then Daniel says in chapter 7, verse 8, then another horn came up, a little one, the Antichrist. He comes out of the 4th empire. This is not, as some liberal scholars have tried to suggest, it's a prediction of Antiochus Epiphanes, who persecuted the Jews back in the intertestamental period. No, Antiochus Epiphanes came out of the 3rd empire, the Greeks. This leader will come out of the 4th empire. The Bible is telling us that in the last days, the ultimate deceiver will arise out of Europe, make a treaty with Israel, and then ultimately break that treaty and attack the nation of Israel. In all of the prophecies of the end times, whether it's the battle of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39, or whether it's the battle of Armageddon predicted in the book of Revelation, we do not find the United States listed in any of those prophecies. So we have to come to the conclusion the United States is not there. Does that mean that the United States has been destroyed and eliminated? That the United States has declined into a second-rate nation and is no longer a major power player in the end times? Or does it mean simply that the United States is being led by someone in the last days who refuses to come to the aid of the nation of Israel in her most desperate hour? What's the answer to that question? We'll come back in a moment and we'll see what the Bible says. My guest today is Dr. Mark Hitchcock, the pastor of Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma, and an adjunct professor at Dallas Theological Seminary, and the author of The Late Great United States. Mark, you have suggested often that America is not mentioned in Bible prophecy in the end times, at least not clearly. It may be part of the total global scenario of what's happening in the end times, but America seems to be missing prophetically. What's the problem in America today that you think needs to be addressed most significantly that may cause the very fact that we're not mentioned in the end times?
Well, I think one of the things that we face today in our country is simply the moral rot that we see from within our country that's spreading. 80% of the material on the internet is pornography. I read a statistic the other day that blew me away. 26%, 1 out of 4 young girls in America, 14 to 19 years of age, have at least one sexually transmitted disease. I think it's what we see happening within our country. Many of these things, the weight of this is going to be the reason that God ultimately is going to bring about the judgment of this country. And when you think about it, God really already is judging America. People always ask that question, where's America in prophecy, and then when's God going to judge America? And I think when you look at a passage like Romans chapter 1, we're already in the process of being judged by God, and that is when God begins to turn people over to their sin. And one of the things that we see when that begins to take place is a sexual revolution takes place in a country. And in Romans 1, then that's followed by a homosexual revolution that takes place. And we see that happening. So when people ask me, when's God going to judge America, really the sad answer to that question is God already is judging America. Now, will that take a more active form sometime in the future? We don't know. But we're already beginning to see the judgment of America on our country.
Yeah, when people look at the situation in America today and they want to say, God bless America, as though we're impervious to the judgment of God, yet when we look at what's happening in America, we almost have to ask ourselves the question, why should God bless America? Why should we not be a candidate for his judgment? Any other factors that you think enter into why America may not be the moral, spiritual, and even military leader of the end times?
Well, I think one of the things is the economic problems we see in our country today. I mean, we've got $10 trillion of debt in our country. It's growing all the time. We've got Social Security out there. We've got Medicare out there. We're becoming the largest debtor nation in the world. In fact, we are. The greatest debtor nation. We're borrowing money from other countries like China just to keep our economy going. If they were to call due all of those debts that we have at some point in time, we would collapse. We have enemies out there that want to destroy us with nuclear weapons or biological weapons, or even an electromagnetic pulse. A nuclear weapon exploded up above our country that would knock out all of the electricity in our nation, really put us back into the dark ages.
Yeah, I've often said if you want to conquer America, all you got to do is turn off the electricity and the gasoline and the air conditioners, and America surrender overnight.
So those are the kinds of things. Our addiction to oil, prices in oil have been fluctuated, but it's going to go up. It's a finite resource. All these kinds of things are the kinds of things that could reduce America really to a second-rate power. And then you throw in an event like the rapture, and that would be like Katrina times 1,000 in our country.
Now suddenly millions of people are missing because the rapture has taken place and the Lord calls the church home to heaven. Think of the impact that would have on the United States in the days ahead. As we look at the future, and the future even of America, we have to ask ourselves the question seriously, why should God continue to bless America, and is there any hope if we turn back to the Lord before it's too late?